assume it's not opened up yet. Welcome, everyone. My name is G. I'm professor in School of Medicine at Deakin University in Australia. And today we'll talk about closing the gap, strategies for global gender equity in brain research. So introduction about actual ALBA network. It's an international network of brain scientists committed to diversity, equity, and inclusion. And since its conception, it's been trying to close the gap with all discriminated groups and all, so not just gender, but any marginalized or any minority or any gap between the more biased and less biased groups. And now there are 1,900, more than 1,900 members in 91 countries. And just Google ALBA and get involved and sign up. It's free. And so the activities are largely awareness, advocacy, data and resources, visibility and recognition, networking and mentoring. And today we are doing the webinars and with the panel discussions. So definitely listen in and have questions ready and type them into Q&A anytime you would like. And really importantly, ALBA declaration, which is on the website, because I know this page is quite wordy, but it's a resource to really guide how you can help to promote diversity and equity in your own local area and local institute and group. So it's a really good framework for you to think about how you can promote good change, positive change. And also, it's really good to sign the declaration as well. So definitely check out the website. Very importantly, ALBA belongs to FENS and is completely supported by IBRO, the International Brain Research Organization. And we have all these other sponsors. And IBRO is really committed to equitable and inclusive access to global neuroscience. There are largely 5 groups representing different groups of land, including APRC, for example, is Asia Pacific, including Australia, where I am located. And also both the IBRO journals, Neuroscience and IBRO Neuroscience reports have many measures like, review being published and things like that, like the reviewers' comments being published to really foster equity as well and fairness. And you should really check out IBRO website, look at this QR code if you have your phone with you, because there are diversity grants to promote equity and geographical diversity. Also parenthood grants for early career principal investigators who are on or approaching parental leave. There are Rising Star Awards to promote the early careers, as well as early career awards, especially from disadvantaged backgrounds. So definitely check that out. Today, we have really good, fantastic lineup of panelists. We have Michelle Hamlet from the US, Vicky Conti from Rwanda, Jennifer Jacobi from Canada, Farah Kaiser also from Canada, and Marianne Joels from Netherlands. We'll talk about them more in detail. So I'd like to acknowledge that we couldn't really recruit an Asian speaker today, but I was born in South Korea, and although I moved to Australia when I was very small, and I was able to reach out to my colleagues, and it seems like Korea is starting to really promote diversity and equity. And so my colleague, Professor Chia Chung, she is organizing a seminar on, sex-specific research, which really always promotes not just equity in science or research or academia, but also actually in health, then, to understand the population better. So just a shout out. Thank you so much for this resource. There are other websites that you can check out if you're from this part of the world, and to see what's going on to really promote diversity and equity. And I also reached out to, also I have to mention that the workshop that she's organizing with the Korean Center for Gender Innovations for Science and Technology Research, which sort of covers broad science and technology, not just medical research, will be actually presented in an upcoming meeting, KSBNS and APSN, which we're both part of, and it'll be in Gyeongju, South Korea. So people who want to come to Korea, I really want to promote that. And I also reached out to my Japanese colleague, and she actually said, unfortunately, there's really not much going on in Japan, other than really some universities trying to have a quota system and promote more hiring of female staff. So she highlighted this website that shows which universities are trying to close the gap more, and it made me wonder why Asia, especially not just East Asia, of course, but East Asia in terms of science contributes so much, but can be so behind with the gender equity, and maybe they still are fighting racism in some ways, because in my personal experience, Asian names are difficult to distinguish, and people can attribute all the work to the more established last name, often assuming you're male. So many times I'll present at a conference and people think that the Asian student next to me who's a male is the senior author and I'm the student. And I've had so many comments where, because my last name's so common, I always thought all those Kim et al. From that older Korean professor who's a male. So I think sometimes we feel like we have to work even harder to get recognized. And there's actually systematic research showing disadvantage in funding for Asians. So this was published in eLife. And if you look at difference in funding rate relative to annual overall rate, you can tell that the green Asian line is much below all the other colored lines. So, and this was really surprising because during my PhD, I had an American professor who was my supervisor, and he always said, "Oh, there's a bias. Asians always do better than everybody else." But when they actually tracked down funding success, it really accumulated to be that Asians were quite disadvantaged. So it made me wonder whether, they're still sort of fighting the more racism battle rather than, gender battle within the region. And I want to take this opportunity to, really encourage people to try to learn Asian names and learn their research as well. And briefly, I want to talk about Australia. So this was a comprehensive paper looking at Swiss research. This is a very famous curve where in early stage of research, there are a lot of females, more than males, but as the career becomes more senior, then the males really take over the females. And this always makes me really sad. And it's the same in Australia. And I see it in so many labs where I feel like all the junior staff are women in the lab 24/7 doing so much work. And then sometimes like the senior staff can take all the credit. And I have to say Australia, the struggle actually starts from the associate professor, more senior level. So in the junior level, there's more equity. And this data is from 2022, extrapolated from our biggest funding agency, always publicly released each year. And they also show that, there's less grants as career progresses. And this is number of grants and overall less funding as well. And so recently, at the end of that year, there was actually a new drastic measure that was really revolutionary. And just to highlight, especially because it's in the senior level that we always lose so many women, because Australia is really cutthroat from the senior level, from associate professor level. They decided that we're going to have equal numbers of grants by gender. So this is like very brief and it's busy, but basically they have done it and they've shown it. And because women do submit, there are fewer grants submitted by women. That meant that actually the percentage can be actually more advantageous. But I think the idea was that you need to show that, you can have a good chance so that women do actually do submit more grants. So it'll be really interesting to see what happens in future. And quickly, this is actually worldwide data, except USA data was, I think, from 2021. But this is September 2023, quite latest data showing how much GDP is spent. And I want to highlight that, Australia actually needs to just spend more money on research, because compared to other developed countries, just doing quite not as well. So it's interesting to see and how East Asia invests more than maybe other parts of Asia. So that's it from me. The first speaker is, I'll stop sharing, sorry. It's my pleasure to introduce Dr. Michelle Hamlet, and she has been working at the National Institute for Health, NIH, in the US for nearly 20 years, covering many areas of research and career development. She's the Faculty Institute for Recruitment for Sustainable Transformation First Program Leader. So thank you so much, Michelle. Take it away.
Thank you very much, Dr. Kim. Thank you, everyone, for this opportunity to tell you about the NIH Common Fund Faculty Institutional Recruitment for Sustainable Transformation, or the FIRST program. Next slide, please. So let's start with what the NIH Common Fund is. It is located within the Office of the Director and is managed in partnership with the other NIH institutes and centers. Under the Common Fund, programs are designed to address emerging scientific opportunities, pressing challenges in biomedical and behavioral research, types of programs that no single NIH institute or center can address on its own, yet the research areas are high priority for NIH as a whole. Common Fund programs are intended to accelerate emerging science, remove research roadblocks, enhance the research workforce, and support high-risk, high-reward science. Next slide, please. So now let's go back to the FIRST program. So what spurred the development of the program in the first place? Well, in looking at the landscape of the United States scientific workforce, we know, for example, that workforce diversity is important to accomplish NIH mission of discovery and innovation towards improving human health. We know that underrepresented assistant professor population growth significantly lags relative to the number of underrepresented PhDs. Underrepresented faculty have reported a lower sense of inclusion, trust, and relationships compared to non-minority colleagues. And we know that the representation gap for U.S. biomedical faculty persists, likely due to institutional cultures that don't have the necessary elements of inclusion and equity within the research environment. Next slide, please. So with that background as a context, the FIRST program was developed to create cultures of inclusive excellence, which means establishing and maintaining scientific environments that can cultivate and benefit from a full range of talent at NIH-funded institutions. There are two components of the FIRST program. It's a faculty cohort. Faculty cohort grantees are institutions who are responsible for hiring a diverse cohort of faculty and providing support for those faculty. They also have the responsibility to establish and maintain cultures of inclusive excellence. There is also a coordination and evaluation center, which, as the name implies, is responsible for evaluating the entire consortium within the FIRST program to determine if the activities conducted by the institutions do in fact yield improvement in inclusive excellence. Next slide, please. And so with a little bit more detail, but not too much, I want to share that the course cohorts have 3 core areas: an admin core, a faculty development core, and evaluation core. And so the administration core is responsible for the hiring of a diverse faculty of faculty scientists. The faculty development core is responsible for developing and managing faculty development activities. And the evaluation core is responsible for institutional level evaluation of the program. Next slide, please. This slide shows where the institutions are located across the United States. You'll notice that there are 3 different colors representing 3 different cohorts, and that represents the fact that there were 3 calls for applications, and institutions were awarded in a given cohort for a total of 3 cohorts. Next slide, please. Very briefly, the Coordination and Evaluation Center, the CEC, also has 3 components: the evaluation, which I mentioned, but they're also responsible for data coordination and communication and dissemination. Next slide, please. The purpose of this slide is not for you to read right now, but it is to convey that the FIRST program is itself a research project. We want to know if programs that include hiring a diverse cohort of faculty, providing support for faculty development, and implementing culture change practices will lead to improved environments of sustainable inclusive excellence, again, which means establishing and maintaining scientific environments that can cultivate and benefit from a full range of talent relative to baseline. Next slide, please. So what I hadn't mentioned earlier is that the complete consortium of FIRST institutions includes 18 US institutions that already have NIH funding. One of them is the University of Maryland, which is actually a partnership program between the University of Maryland School of Medicine and the University of Maryland, Baltimore County. And so they are implementing this FIRST model, if you will, with the components that I described earlier to see if they can advance inclusive excellence in the following research areas: cancer biology, neuroscience, and microbiology, immunology, and infectious diseases. May I have the next slide, please? I also wanted to provide a brief highlight of one of our FIRST faculty members who is at the University of Alabama at Birmingham. University of Alabama at Birmingham is in partnership with Tuskegee University, and they have a program that's completely focused on addressing health disparities. The individual shown here, Dr. Schoonover, is one of our FIRST faculty at the University of Alabama. She's studying how neurons in the brain create memories in schizophrenia patients. Ultimately, the long-term goal of her research is to create a brain bank of human samples from diverse populations diagnosed with psychiatric disorders. I want to read a quote from Dr. Schoonover, which I think helps to demonstrate the promise of this FIRST program. The FIRST program has united a group of young investigators who all have the same goals: to be successful health disparities researchers who positively impact our fields. The support I have received, not only from my cohort, but from the FIRST mentors, has been immeasurable. And I should say that by the end of the program, we are projected to have over 180 faculty members hired through this program. May I have the last slide, please? Or second to last slide. And so to wrap up, we want to talk about the definition of success. What would we identify as successful first program? Well, we would want to see a significant systemic and sustainable institutional culture change over baseline towards inclusive excellence. We want to see the recruitment and hiring of a diverse cohort of faculty. And we'd like to see that all of the activities in place, faculty development, mentoring, sponsorship, will all lead to a faculty member, early stage faculty member, who can move their way to an independent research career, leading to submitting grant applications and receiving, for example, NIH or other sources of funding, which altogether will end in retention and promotion to tenured faculty. Finally, last slide, please. I need to acknowledge that there are many people involved, both in the development of the first program and its maintenance over time. This slide shows all of the individuals who have played a role in the launching and continuation of the first program. I will stop there. Again, I thank you for your time, and I look forward to your questions later.
Amazing. That's really inspiring. And the case of Shunova is really, yeah, it was really good to see. People, please ask questions in the Q&A. We'll have a panel discussion later. So our next speaker is Dr. Vicky Pondy, who's a resident researcher at Ames Research and Innovation Center. And I'm really looking forward to her talk on climate change as well. Her talk is not on climate change, but that's what she does. So it'll be really good to see that perspective, how they're promoting diversity. So she leads Initiative for Gender Equality, Diversity and Inclusion at Ames, Rwanda, and Pan-African Network. Take it away.
So hi, everyone. Hope everyone are doing good. Good morning, good evening, or good afternoon, wherever you are. So I was already introduced, and then I will not come again. So I just wanted today to talk about this initiative that we have in my institutions, which is the African Institute for Mathematical Science. And the initiative is called the Ames Women in STEM Initiative. So before talking about Ames Women in STEM Initiative, I just want to give you a broad overview about the institutions, Ames. So Ames, as the name is, the African Institute for Mathematical Science. And Ames is a Pan-African institution with centers of excellence and then research center. So as you can see, and from this, yes, this graph, the African graph. So we are basically in 5 countries, which is Senegal. We are in Ghana. We are in Cameroon. We are also in South Africa, and then we are in Rwanda. Rwanda, we have 2 centers, which is the academic center and then the research and innovation center. And then our vision, as I just pointed here, is to come up with a transformative way of STEM and innovation to all Africa by bringing more women also as in terms of giving them the opportunity to hold on those STEM fields. And so as I was saying, we do have aside of our excellence centers, our research and innovation center, we do have an initiative that we called Ames Industry Initiative. We have the teacher training program. We have the Quantum Leap Africa. So this is the part that are joining mostly like the brain research, and we have the data science also team as well. So we, aside of our excellent centers and research and innovation center. We do have some kind of chapter that we are in UK, Canada, Germany, and Scandinavia that are like some kind of partner with whom we are working at AIMS. So basically, sorry, when AIMS is started, we wanted a quota of having at least 30% of women enrolled in all our program, aside of including the one in research. So coming now on yes, so on the AWISE initiative. So the AWISE, which is AIMS Women in STEMs initiative, is one of our flagship program that has been which has the mandate, you know, to accelerate the progress of African women in STEMs through evidence-based and then also advocacy, and also increasing some kind of investments in terms of adopting of best practice, engaging men, and also collaboration with other network through a STEM pipeline. And the initiative has been launched in 2015 during this, before the Next STEM Forum initiative. And then it was like a consultation meeting, which was aiming to bring together all network and the initiative in STEMs through all Africa in order to develop a Pan-African, to contribute to the development of the Pan-African agenda for women in STEM. And as you can see, basically the key priorities that we have in our initiative at AIMS-WISE, firstly, is to promote a Pan-African dialogue and then collaboration among women in STEMs through partnership and then collective activities to bring more impact. And then another initiative that we do have is also to address some kind of a need, database, you know, to bring more data sets on the representative of women in STEM. And STEM field, we are talking mostly basically on the mathematical science. And then we talk here also on in terms of artificial intelligence, data science, quantum, and so on, and even in climate science as well. And also, one of our key priorities is also to support in terms of bringing more decision making in terms of empowering more our students across Africa, and then also researchers also across Africa to be able to contribute to the development of Africa. And we are also bringing some kind of fund support. I will show some kind of case that we had in terms of giving more opportunity to women, especially in research, to be able to accomplish their work. So we have this initiative that we call AIMS, the climate science, women in climate science program that we did. We have even 2 fellowship that we had. We give funds to women in research to be able to contribute toward their research. So in terms of initiative in AIMS-WISE, in order to be able, you know, to bridge the gap of women enrollment in STEM sphere in Africa. As I was saying, when we take this first component, which is the gender inclusivity and promotion of women in science, what I already mentioned that basically our first target was when we are doing for our master degree program for all our centers was to come up at least with 30%, and we were having 33% across the network. But since AIMS has been built up since 20 years, we have our 20th anniversary recently that we call the Circular event, which is a growing up process. The new vision for at AIMS is to come up at some point when we are doing our recruitment of top of excellent, you know, talented female. We want to have them like 50% of the female in our batch whole. And aside of that, we have what we call the teacher training program, which is to empower more teachers for them to be able to adopt more some kind of new way of teaching mathematical science, and then also avoiding stereotypes. And we do have some kind of initiative in our AIMS industry initiative that we do support women that are led in business in Africa, for them to also empower them. And we do this kind of JD training for our students and our students in master degree, as well as our students in PhD level, which is to give them the gender equity, diversity, and inclusion knowledge, how for them to be able, to use it in their research and even after in their career pathway. So aside of that, we have this how we also counter this kind of gender inclusiveness in the initiative that we call the Next Einstein Forum, which is a platform that brings all over the Africa scientists. And then when we are having this program which are like for each 2 years, what we do, we make sure that at least we have 42% of top scientists that are female also enrolled in the program. And then no, so the 40%, and but basically the age is like they have to be under 40 years old. And aside of that, we have a public engagement and outreach program. So mostly the public engagement and outreach program, what we do is we mostly organize some conferences with international organizations. So actually, as an information, we will be having the international the Pan-African Conference of Women in Science with the International Network of Women in Science, which is in West. So we will be having this conference here in Rwanda in November. So I think this is something that we always do, like per 2 years. And we also have this interaction with other institutions to make sure that we give them some kind of training, or we collaborate to have more impact in terms of women enrolled in mathematics. And then we celebrate all those events through our channel. So in terms of research, just to conclude, in terms of research, what we do, I was mentioning that we have a program that we call Women in Climate Change Fellowship, that we give like for more than 35,000 USD to a woman in most researchers in Africa, for them to be able to conduct well their research. And aside of that, we do as I was saying, the JD training mostly for our researchers and then our students. We also provide some kind of opportunity for our researchers, in terms of giving them an opportunity to be the woman to be also researchers in our network, and also an opportunity for them to travel for more conferences globally. So basically, just to show some cases of training that we did, and then how we also, like in terms of public engagement, give light to more of women based on their work through Africa Pipeline. So I think for me to be on time, I'll just stop here for now, and then I will be more open to have more questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you for showing us all the exciting initiative, Vicky. Please, people, ask questions. Of course, I'm sure they'll all come flooding in later. Our next speaker is Dr. Jennifer Jacoby, who is the Chair for Women in Science and Engineering for the British Columbia and Yukon region in Canada. She was trained in kinesiology and neuromuscular physiology. So yeah, take it away. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Kim. Can you see my slides okay?
Yes, we can.
Perfect. Thank you. I'd like to begin by acknowledging that I'm joining today from the unceded and ancestral territories of the Syilx Okanagan people I am very grateful for the caretakers of this land and to be able to live, work, and play in such a beautiful place. So I'm joining you from British Columbia, Canada, from the Okanagan Valley. Today, I'm going to speak to you about the NSERC chairs for women in science and engineering, as well as inclusion for science and engineering. These programs are supported by the Natural Science and Engineering Research Council of Canada. And advancing, maybe. There we go. The first thing I'd like to do is introduce to you the 5 chairs. Well, actually 4 chairs for women in science and engineering. Historically, back to 1996 in Canada, the chair for women in science and engineering was divided into 5 regions across the country. So geographically, it was quite large. And the program began to support women in science and engineering. With the evolution of time and the appreciation for intersectionality, as well as other individuals from underrepresented groups. We could look at immigrants, racialized individuals, Indigenous people, gender diverse individuals. The chair program expanded. And in recognition of this expansion of initiatives, NSERC has evolved the program to the chairs for inclusion in science and engineering. The first program began about a year ago, and not only identifying the advancement of the initiatives to support women and diverse groups, we also recognize that it's heavy lifting, it's heavy work, and it's really busy and complex. So rather than having 1 chair, there's 3 chairs for each region is the model that we're evolving to. I'm going to share a little bit about the network, whether it be the CWSE or the CISE. So if you look at this network framework, all of the chairs are active researchers. This is really important because we want to provide role models for individuals within the research community. One of our primary objectives is to advocate and educate in the area of equity, diversity, and inclusion, so EDI. So what we really want to do is diversify and nurture Canada's talent pool. We're all EDI experts in various unique niches, and we work collaboratively to support each other across our nation in Canada to support the initiatives for inclusion. What I'm going to do is move from the long-standing footprint where we build equitable and meaningful change, is identify we can't do this alone. So across our network, we build from academic institutions all the way through out to industry. We have both partners as well as collaborators that assist us in rolling out our initiatives, completing our initiatives, and promoting our initiatives. And most importantly, providing an opportunity to mentor and role model other individuals within the STEM community. So science, technology, engineering, and math. We cover various different pathways. So we go from early education all the way through to career advancement, both within academia as well as in industry. So we're working with youth in schools, colleges, and universities, working in industry, inclusive of academic institutions. We work with granting agencies, government, and various different scientific organizations. So for example, Canadian Science Centers might be one example, but that is only just one example. So we really try to be catalysts and ambassadors for different pathways. What I'm going to do now is highlight 2 different areas from my particular program. So the West Coast Women Engineering and Science and Technology, to speak to 2 elements that were discussed at the last webinar and identified both in that webinar as well as earlier today with respect to challenges for recruitment as well as retention. So in this particular slide, I'm identifying our work from early education all the way out to post-secondary. This particular program starts with a curriculum initiative where staff and myself go in and work in classrooms, bringing 4 hands-on STEM activities to youth. The reason we do 4 is we don't want just a blast in and a blast out for something that is not meaningful to the curriculum within BC. So all of our activities align with the BC curriculum. We develop a 4-week program, and then that 4-week program is left with the teachers so that they can then teach in subsequent years the material that we've shared. Now, this is not just us going in and interacting with classroom. The most important part is we're mentoring the teachers. We're mentoring the teachers to create inclusive spaces for diverse learners, as well as really bring in scientific content to early years, because most of our elementary school and even some of our middle school teachers are not trained within the sciences. So we're trying to train them within the sciences and bring in inclusive spaces. Now, not only do we mentor the teachers to make this really relevant for the students and ensure that there's role models, we've been working with university students. So in this particular slide, you can see working with Indigenous communities. So we have a partnership with Indigenous programs and services here at UBC Okanagan, and we train the teachers in the classroom, but Indigenous university students, gender diverse university students, we train them in these activities, and then they go in with the staff, or once they become really competent, some of them are now going into various Indigenous communities on their own. This is really important because now it's role modeling. So youth can see themselves in the diverse sciences. So now we've got mentorship with role modeling, and with some communities, we're now building in elements of Indigenous content so that it's not just kind of Western sciences. We're really talking about land and indigeneity as far as learning is concerned across the diverse methods. So we've kind of got this package program, if you will, where we go from mentoring to role modeling, from teachers to students. So we have a full circle. We're finding this is very beneficial, and we're reaching across various different areas of the province. So it's creating an inclusive delivery model. So this fosters not only recruitment, but a little bit of retention, and excites both youth as well as university students and teachers to consider the importance of STEM within everyday life. Now, the next program I'm going to share with you is going to go a little bit higher and focus a little bit more on retention, where I'm going to look at post-secondary and actually into the career stages, focusing on the role that men or males can do. So the bottom half of the slide here identifies a male allyship workshop. So we could talk about, sorry, I woke up a little sick today and my throat's getting to me, so pardon me. We can work individually as underrepresented persons together, or we can pull in those that are of the majority and help them to support us in advancing diversity within the sciences. So what we focused on was a male allyship workshop here at the university, and we've rolled out to other institutions. And what it really focused on was creating a community of engagement, really helping men understand that there is still an issue with gender diversity. To quote one particular participant, do we still have a diversity problem with women? And it was like, okay, so here's our learning and starting point. Yes, we do. So we're able to not only provide the data, which they're scientists or leaders within their own academic fields, and then create ways that they can support women. So one of the particular examples that rolled out of this is support from one of the deans and directors to create a Women in Science initiative within their program. Another particular small success, but I think it's a really meaningful success, is one of the academic leaders started holding regular meetings with females in their faculty and asking what do they need, what are their challenges, and how can they support them. So going from an individual basis to an institutional basis was really rich. The other initiative that I'm going to share, stepping back into kind of the post-secondary university learner system, is a Math to Power Her Life. We've done this in partnership with a postdoctoral fellow, and what we create is a math event on a weekend. Yes, girls like to come on a Saturday, and they're actually individuals that identify as girls and women or gender diverse. And we use university students as leaders. So the university students are the leaders, and it creates a safe space and an inclusive space for gender diverse youth to explore and really dive into mathematics. And it's been enormously rewarding for students that often in their high schools don't find space or place to be comfortable in what they enjoy. So once again, using the elements of role modeling and mentorship throughout the program. The last thing I want to identify is the Academic Advancement Workshop. This is an initiative across the NSERC chairs, and we go into different universities across the country and aid and assist women in understanding advancement. Why aren't you applying for your next stage of professorship? What do you need versus what do you perceive? And going about CVs, development, and encouragement, not from a specific institutional lens, but in Canada, we have some consistent standards, if you will, across most institutions. So really encouraging women to lean into the next stage of their academic career progression. And I'm just going to advance to the last slide here, which is not happening, and say thank you very much. I look forward to any questions, and I've really enjoyed the opportunity to speak with you today. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jen. I love maths, so you made me really happy. And yeah, I felt so discriminated every math challenge and Olympiad I attended as a kid. So it was really good to see the really early life education level. So we'll get to questions later. Our next speaker is Dr. Farah Kaiser, who's a genomics researcher by training. She, outside the lab, she has written about science for various media outlets and served on the Canadian Chief Science Advisors Inaugural Youth Council and sits on the Let's Talk Science Board of Directors. So she will talk about the Fix the Gap program. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you for the introduction. Just going to say I'm not a doctor, but very excited to be here and tell you all a little bit about Fix the Gap. So I'm speaking on behalf of 500 Women Scientists today, which is a global grassroots nonprofit that's dedicated to making science and society open, inclusive, and accessible. You can find out more on 500womenscientists.org. And I wanted to tell you a little bit more about the programs and initiatives. So there are sort of three buckets under which 500 Women Scientists work falls under. There's changing the face of science through things such as GAGE, which is a global directory of STEM professionals from all over the world across disciplines, which you can use to invite speakers, to look for experts that you need to interview, or to look for speakers for your panels, your conference sessions. There are sessions such as Wikipedia edit-a-thon, so creating pages about all of these diverse sciences to make sure that they are accessible to the public, as well as Fellowship for the Future and Black Women's Collective. We also have holding institutions accountable as one of our programs, so that involves policy work, that involves supporting moms and parents in science, reproductive justice. And lastly, we have the Building Collective Power, where that includes pods, so local chapters across the world, Fix the Gap, and partnerships. And for today, I'm going to be focusing on Fix the Gap. So where did Fix the Gap begin? Well, it began in January 2021 when Dr. Jane Zelkova, who's one of the co-founders of 500 Women Scientists, actually tweeted out this question of, is there a public database listing a range for speaking fees honoraria? If not, is there interest in creating a transparent resource to make it easy to set the standard and ensure scientists, especially women, are getting paid for their time and effort? This ended up actually getting a lot of attention. A lot of folks expressed their interest in contributing the honorary that they had received. A lot of folks were curious, well, what do people receive? I'd love to see this data. And that's how Fix the Gap began. But I will point out that why is Fix the Gap? Why is something like this important in the first place? Well, the pay equity gap for folks in the STEM fields, so that's science, technology, engineering, maths, and medicine, has been well documented. For example, in a 2022 survey of over 25,000 US-based STEM professionals, the study found that white male scientists who are not disabled receive greater pay, respect, and access to career opportunities compared to scientists belonging to historically underrepresented groups, including women, trans folks, as well as disabled folks. Now, to be clear, there are several facets of pay equity to consider when it comes to normalizing financial compensation. That includes salaries, that includes stipends for grad students and trainees, postdoctoral fellowships. Just one such facet is considering honoraria for speaking engagements. And one of the reasons why we did choose to focus on this is because past work from 500 Women Scientists, including a survey, found that STEM professionals actually ask for resources to improve their financial literacy, including how to navigate compensation when using their STEM expertise for speaking engagements. So that's a little bit about why we decided to go down this route with Fix the Gap. So what we ended up doing was creating a very comprehensive survey, which we distributed in spring 2021. Our whole goal here was to crowdsource honorary and speaking fees from across personal backgrounds, STEM disciplines, career stages, geographies, and contexts. We tried to consider, all the different types of speaking engagements folks might be invited for, including keynotes, panels, invited talks, career symposia, workshops, including a miscellaneous section for any other form of speaking engagement folks might have been invited for, such as media interviews, podcasts, and so on. We ended up receiving responses from over 700 STEM professionals who collectively submitted over 1,000 honoraria. And then we started going through this data. So just to give you a sense of who filled out the survey. So all of the 744 respondents, it was 407 folks who actually submitted a total of 1,173 entries for speaking engagements. All these 407 respondents who had submitted the honoraria were living in a total of 33 countries. I will note that they were largely from the United States, Canada, and United Kingdom, but we did have quite a bit of diversity in responses. And if we look at sort of the majority of respondents, who are they? Well, most were aged between 31 to 40 years old or were 41 to 50 years old. Most self-identified as women. There was a small minority that self-identifies as disabled. Several held a research-based PhD. So on average, our average respondent was someone who was living in North America and the United Kingdom. They were 31 to 40 years old or 41 to 50. They were largely women and they largely had PhDs. That's good to keep in mind as I walk you through the next parts. So we took all of that data and we ended up building Fix the Gap, an open access database that anyone, including all of you today, can head to and actually explore all of these honoraria that STEM folks have received for speaking engagements. You can see that you can look at this data either as a graph or as a table, and there are filters on the side that you can use to filter out the data. So for example, you could pick the type of speaking engagement, you could pick the type of organization, whether it's an academic, industry, nonprofit. You can select the type of talk delivery, so is it virtual or in person, and you can also filter according to the type of honor. For example, the type of person. So for example, did this person belong to science, technology, or engineering? What age range are they in? What gender have they reported? Which country do they belong to? What is their highest degree? So there's a lot of data that you can play around with. I'm actually not going to talk about all the data today because this is something you can explore. But instead, I wanted to talk a little bit about the responses that we heard from folks who had filled out the survey, because it gives us some very interesting insight into sort of the perceptions around navigating financial compensation. So a lot of the comments that we received were folks who appreciated the survey and the topic being explored. So comments like, "This is a great idea. Thanks for organizing the survey." We also received comments where folks raised issues related to broader pay inequity. So for example, I'm going to read out this quote here that mentions, "I think it might be appropriate to have a discussion about whether expectations for compensation should be different for established scientists with stable, comfortably high salary day jobs and an included expectation of engaging with the community and people who have yet to establish themselves or are working without the support of salary and stability from an institution." A very important point. Another theme that we saw commonly was that folks raised concerns about difficulty in navigating compensation because speaking was often considered to be a part of their role. So for example, one comment that we received pointed out that it is culturally unacceptable to require payment for speaking engagements in my country. People's time is not valued regardless of expertise. We also heard from folks who had never considered the thought of receiving or asking about speaking honoraria or fees. So one person pointed out, "Thanks for the survey. It's made me reflect on the fact that I make many presentations and give many talks without ever thinking if I should be compensated or not. I believe I deserve compensation in some cases." One comment pointed out that actually they were not in favor of receiving honoraria at all. So they pointed out that I totally disagree with this. I have a few years of experience in science, but I am already disappointed with how unequal the access to science is. I work in Sweden. I've never had issues to attend a conference or support my research because of financial matters, but conferences are extremely expensive, even now that they are held digitally. We as STEM professionals should have fair salaries and equal pay. Let's not make science more unequal than it is now. Let's instead demand equal pay. And lastly, some comments pointed out that there was a need to better value STEM professionals' time and effort. So this long quote that I'm going to read out now is, This is something I hardly ever think of. The few times colleagues of mine mentioned they were receiving honorary for a talk, it seemed like something out of this world. I guess that as scientists, we get too used to the mission of sharing knowledge because we know it is what the world needs. However, we also have to value our time and effort in this mission, and that can be a very difficult ethical balance internally. So those are some of the comments that we received in this Fix the Gap survey. There's a lot to unpack here, and maybe we'll get some questions to dive into this. But I think one of the key things that I'm taking away from this is that we do need a cultural change to better value researchers' times and efforts, especially for researchers belonging to historically excluded communities. And that includes conversations about thinking, when is compensation appropriate? How do we sort of account for organizations with varying financial budgets? And also, how do we account for the fact that some folks are early in their career stages where being valued for their time and effort is critical when they're being pulled for in so many different ways? So as part of this work, 5 Scientists has been compiling resources that people can use to navigate financial literacy. So thankfully, we are not alone in this, and there are a lot of organizations who are working to address this issue. I will drop these resources in the chat later, but I did want to point out that there's the Ladies Get Paid, which is a global platform and community, as well as a book that you can use to navigate financial compensation. There's the Skim Impacts Paid Family Leave database, which I believe is global. It is massive. There's the Canadian Federation of University Women's Pay Equity Advocacy Campaign Toolkit. So a helpful toolkit and helpful resources that you can use to advocate for pay equity on your campuses. There's a Gender Pay Gap bot, which was very active on Twitter. I'm not sure if it still is, but it will point out sort of the gap in salaries at different institutions. There's Pay Up, The Future of Women in Work, which is a lovely book to read to kind of think about what the future of women in work could look like. There's a Speaker Lab fee calculator, and there's a When Do I Earn Out calculator, which is for if you're writing a book, for example, and you're receiving an advance, how many books do you have to sell to earn out your advance? So these are some of the resources that exist. You can find more on 5hormonescientists.org, as well as broadly across the internet, of course. And to sort of cap it off here, I do want to acknowledge that 5 Women Scientists as an organization currently is actually in a pause because we're currently navigating sort of questions about sustainability and fundraising. But despite this, Fix the Gap does remain open for all. It's an open access database that we hope will help empower everyone. To our knowledge, it's the first open access database of honorarium fees received by STEM professionals for speaking engagements. In spite of some of the limitations that exist in this database, as well as important questions about what happens when you share a data like this broadly? Does that mean that people may receive lower honoraria? That's a whole question that we can get into. It is a starting point for STEM professionals and event organizers alike to consider when it comes to financial compensation. And it's clear from these responses that a broader conversation is necessary when it comes to seeking financial compensation for STEM expertise. And maybe we'll have a little bit of that conversation today. With that, I wanted to say thank you all for listening, and I look forward to the discussion later.
Amazing. I loved your quantitative and qualitative data. It's quite innovative. I haven't seen data like that before. I'll definitely be checking that website out. So our next speaker is Dr. Marianne Jols, who has obtained a PhD in Utrecht in the Netherlands. And yeah, she was awarded the ALBA-IBRO Diversity Prize in 2021 for her outstanding work to promote women's careers in neuroscience. So take it away. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. It's a pleasure to give a presentation here. I only just realized that I never ask a honorarium for any talk, so previous talk opened my eyes. So I'm based in the Netherlands. I'm going to give you a little bit of information about the position of women in science in the Netherlands. So I'll focus on that and not so much on diversity as an example of how things go in European countries. So is there still a need to address this subject? Now, this is a figure that you see right now from what's called SHEVIG figures. It's an overview that's made by the European Commission every, I don't know how many years, 4 years or so. These are numbers from 2021. And it shows on the y-axis in the light blue bars the percentage of females among the research staff, which is, well, between, let's say, 30 and 60%. And in the dark blue bars, the expenditure, the R&D expenditure per capita. Now, where's the Netherlands? That's where we are. People always think of the Netherlands as a rather liberal and forward country, but if you regard the position of women, it's actually quite disappointing. We're always on the bottom of the list. In this case, amidst countries of Luxembourg, Hungary, Austria, Czech Republic, and Germany. It's not so much the amount of money that's spent, which is the dark blue bars, which is quite high, especially in Luxembourg, Netherlands, Austria, and Germany. In fact, it seems to be an inverse relationship between the participation of women in science and the expenditure on research and development, which in itself is an interesting observation. So the percentage has increased over the years, but our position as the Netherlands in the list has not changed. This is numbers from an annual overview that the Network of Female Professors releases every year. We've seen the same scissors in one of the previous presentations. So the green bars are the male percentage of full professors in academic world. The dark blue bars is the green bars are the women, and the dark blue bars are the men. And up to the level of assistant professor, it's more or less equal. But then the numbers for the women, they dive into the abyss to about, less than 30% female full professors. And when you go to the level of institute directors, it's even lower than that. There are many reasons to explain that. One of the typical things in the Netherlands, which I would like to highlight, is that if you look at the numbers of the statistics board in the Netherlands, the participation of women in the job market is not so bad. About 70% of women have a paid job. But the problem is more that they work on average 26 hours per week. So that's what we call the Monday, Tuesday, Thursday workers. And it actually, you can see it on the roads in the country, which are congested on these 3 days. I think in academic world, probably most women work for 4 days per week. But the problem is that most men work full time. And if you don't compensate for that lost time, then it's very difficult to keep up with your production at the same level. So correcting the output for the amount of time that you can invest in your work is a very important thing. Now, what I will do in the next few slides is give a few examples of how Dutch programs have addressed this problem that seems to occur in the step from assistant to associate professor, and even more from associate to full professor. So here are some measures that were taken by the Dutch Science Foundation, NWO. The first point actually addresses what I just said, the amount of time that women can invest in doing their research. Most of the personal grants have a time limitation, so you can apply for them, let's say, up to 3 years after getting your PhD degree, or up to 8 years after your PhD degree. And the good thing is that NWO already quite some time ago gives the possibility to correct for, let's say, childcare or whatever care, which is to the advantage of most women, and in some cases also for the men. So you can add up the number of months you've been away, and then get an extension during which you can apply for your personal grant up to a certain limit. So that's one good thing, and it's still in place. Then there were calls that were open specifically for women. One of them was called Meervoud, and it was meant to make the step from a temporary contract to a tenured assistant professor level. That's very important because percentage-wise, there are more women on temporary contracts than men, and sometimes this kind of grant helps to nudge the employer to give people a tenured contract. Unfortunately, the program was discontinued. The main reason being that there were too few good applications. And that's not because there were too few women that needed this kind of support, but it means that your employer has to guarantee to give you a tenured position, and not many of the universities were actually willing to give that kind of guarantee. So in that sense, it was deemed not to be enough effective. Another idea was to have regular calls, so regular career calls for men and for women. And the women that were granted this award got an extra bonus. And in fact, it was given to the employer, but there was one condition, that if the employer was to receive the money, the employer also had to guarantee that this woman will be promoted, either from assistant to associate professor or from associate to full professor, a little bit depending on the stage of the career round. Again, this is discontinued, not because it was not a success, although some universities felt forced by this measure to promote women. But the funding agency is reconsidering a new program, and in one form or another, this will return because it was considered to be relatively a success. What they also do on a regular basis is monitor the success rate of men and women for these personal grants. And the gap is not that big. So women had a 4% lower chance of getting the grant once they applied. But of course, the question is, do they always apply to in the same rate as the male researchers? And that's still a big question mark. Now I will highlight another initiative and also make a point by highlighting this program. In 2017, it was exactly 100 years ago that the first female professor in the Netherlands was appointed at the university. And at that time, the Academy of Sciences and the universities launched a joint program, the Academy of Sciences, to increase the number of female members, and the universities to increase the number of female full professors. And it was just a little bit of financial support to give the money for the gap in salary between the associate and the full professor. And it did work. So here is the percentual increase per year in the female full professors. And you can see that in this particular year, there was between a 2 and a 2.5% increase. Whereas on an annual basis, for many, many years, it's been only 1%. The problem of the program you can see here quite clearly, because in the years thereafter, it went back to the original number. So these kind of programs are a temporary injection, very nice, but if the culture is not changed, it drops back to where it was before. Then 2 examples of local initiatives by universities. This was one I was involved in when I worked in Amsterdam. We launched something that was called the McGillivray Fellowship. It was a prestigious recruitment, and I emphasize the word prestigious because it means it's more like an award. It really helps women in their career. The 4th round was about a year ago. The Women's Network, which almost forced the Faculty of Science to launch this program, was founded in 2005. And that was at the time that there was only 1 female full professor in the faculty amongst 75. And I was that 1 female professor. It's not always new positions, but it's more like a joint call for recruit and giving it more prestige. It comes with a startup package and bench fee, which is not the standard in the Netherlands. And it also comes with other benefits like more access to university leadership, more mentoring, sponsoring, leadership training, etc. So we'll see how that works out and if it's continued. This was actually inspired by another initiative in Groningen, which started even before that, a few years before, in the science faculty, and it was adopted by the rest of the university in 2007, the Rosalind Franklin Fellowship. They have had now 44 fellows. Again, it's prestigious. The idea is that within 5 years, you will grow to a position of full professor, female, full professor. Initially, the university pays part of the salary, and then the faculty has to guarantee a structural position for these female Rosalind Franklin Fellows. Again, it comes with a startup package, leadership training, etc. I must say that the experience is that most candidates come from abroad. Most candidates are happy, but not always, and that comes probably because there are different expectations. So in other countries, there are different criteria to be promoted. And some of the candidates were disappointed because they were not promoted. And this has been a serious issue that's a subject of discussion, but it will continue. And then a final slide. A few local initiatives at university medical centers, which in the Netherlands are different legal entities than universities. Some of them have, in specific years, targets to promote a given number of associate professors to the level of full professors. As I showed before, that doesn't change the culture. So usually it works for 1 year and then it falls back to the numbers of the previous years. Some university medical centers have specific leadership programs, like in Utrecht, Stijn Privé program. Again, it's something prestigious. It's considered to be onerous to be selected. These programs are regularly evaluated, and the experience is that most women say the most important aspect of being part of this program was that I built a network of women in the same position as myself, and it's been a network for life, very beneficial for my career. My final job was in Groningen, where I was dean of a medical faculty. And one of the first things I changed was to have a transparent promotion system with clear criteria for promotion to assistant, associate, and full professor. Very open system with a promotion committee of diverse composition and regular training to be aware of implicit bias. And my final remark is this, is to ease the promotion of women asks really for a change in culture. And I've heard that in many of the presentations today, with effective measures at all levels. If you don't change the culture, it's only a temporary thing. So it has to be changed from the bottom to the top, and that's more sustainable than temporary programs.
Amazing. Thank you so much. And I think your presentation is actually perfect to start the first question. I actually want to start with Jacques' question on the scissor curve that's so famous. So the gender gap further increases at associate professor and full professor level. Are there any programs or strategies to enhance the retainment or promotion at senior levels? And I think Marianne mentioned a few, but what would you suggest is important for the implementation of that program? And I'd like to open up to the other panel members whether their areas and regions are open to adopting similar programs or already have those programs to actually help to retain and promote women.
Well, as I said,
So Marianne,
from experience, it's very important that things are transparent and that the same criteria adhere to everyone, not sort of backroom discussions. And also, of course, that young scientists are stimulated to have a talk with their supervisor. What are the criteria I need to meet, and how can I get there? So, yeah, that's my experience.
Yeah, what do other speakers think in terms of adopting similar approaches or have already adopting them in your region? Don't be polite, jump in.
I think I wholeheartedly agree. Transparency is important. I think the other element to consider is the formulation of the committee. As best as possible, trying to ensure that diversity is present within the committee. Otherwise, you can have common think, if you will, if there's one derogatory voice or biased voice. So I think it's really important to have diversity within a committee to understand the complexity of many of the curriculum vitae that we see for promotion.
Vicky, your talk sort of focused a lot on the initiative on the early careers. I mean, is retention and promotion starting to be a focus now that you are reaching sort of those 30–50% target of enrollment? I asked Vicky. Hello.
Hello. Yes, please. Yes, please.
Yeah. So, pardon? No, I was trying to see whether Africa has similar plans for this sort of retention and promotion programs for more senior level of academics, since your program showed that the early careers or students were, meeting sort of those quotas.
Yes, so in our network at AIMS, what we do, as I've also highlighted previously, is we do have these opportunities mostly for our alumni to be also enrolled in the program. From the master degree, we open opportunity for them to enroll in the PhD level. And then also most of our PhD that we have, even for the fellowship that we do open opportunities also for women to also be like some kind of research chair. I don't know, if I really got what the question that you were asking. So we do have promotion, some kind of incitation to also give women that had in terms of capacity to be able to run a research a team, or maybe to lead a research team. We do have this. This is in the context of AIMS, but mostly when you look at in Africa, in the context of Africa, I think we still have this gap in terms of leadership roles in the research field in Africa. So I think this is also some kind of opportunity that we can do to also bring more women, in the research field to lead.
Thank you, Marian. Did you want
to also be like some kind of role model for others as well? Thank you.
Thank you. Did you want to add something, Maria?
Yeah, I forgot to say something about the promotion system, because one thing that always comes up is that people say, well, maybe it's unfair if you work a certain quota or you want to promote only the women, etc. So at the start, we said, well, let's aim for 50-50. So for the new promotions, roughly on an annual basis, 50% should be female, 50% male. Then nobody can complain. And it was not something done on purpose, but if we averaged over 5 years, it was exactly 50-50.
Oh, that's really good to hear. Now that women's success rate has exceeded for this year, in our grant system, I think there were a lot of complaints. And I was like, hey, men, just, you had centuries of advantage, just relax. Yeah. Anyway, I want to actually keep going with the more group-based questions. So Yelena Brasanak has asked, are there innovative approaches to mentoring and networking that can help bridge the gender gap in brain research, particularly for earlier career researchers? And, since it's an innovation question, of course, I don't want to limit to brain. So if any disciplines know something quite innovative, not something that's always been regular, that would be really great to answer. No, nothing innovative. Sarah?
Okay, so one of the programs that 500 Women Scientists has is called Fellowship for the Future. It's a fellowship to help support work that folks are doing outside of sort of the institution. So things that they're doing to work with communities. So for example, we've supported a person who helped make comics, one person who was leading biodiversity related initiatives and trips to just help people in the community understand sort of the plants and their background. So I think the Fellowship for the Future program is an idea, it's an example of how organizations who aren't generally working in academia, so whether they're nonprofits or based out in the community, can still invest in supporting academics and supporting scientists to do work that helps really move science outside of sort of the lab and the ivory tower to sort of the communities beyond. So I think that's one example. If there happen to be nonprofits in the audience today who are thinking about, well, how can I support scientists? How can I support folks who are historically underrepresented? Well, part of it is, helping support scientists sort of do that work in engaging with community, because a lot of the times that work is unpaid, or it's sort of being done sort of either the corner of your plate when you have so many other priorities and work on your mind too.
Oh, thank you. That reminds me, I find that the younger and younger that my mentees and my students and postdocs get, they are asking more and more to be to have meaning in their research. And I did find that the community sort of engagement really, really helped them to find that sort of meaning. And I think that sounds really different to actually engage outside the field. Anyone else?
Yeah, maybe I can
Maria?
add. What in my experience is very effective is networks of, let's say, early mid-career people, like young academies. So we have in almost all European countries, we have a young academy, and also at the local universities, there are young academies. And of course, Spence has the best Kavli network of excellence. And these people are in age-wise closer to the target population we're talking about. So PhD students, postdocs, and they give a lot of information about how to start your group, how to relate to other scientists, etc. So it's a great way of leveraging the knowledge of young people and involving even younger ones. So that's really been very helpful and very effective.
Thank you. I want to go back to this closing the gap at senior levels. Question by Natasha. Regarding the closing gap for senior levels, excellence is mentioned a lot today. I'm wondering where the disparity comes from. Is it that women and other underrepresented groups are excluded although they reach excellence criteria, or is it rather that they are evaluated as lacking in excellence because of bias? If latter is the case, how can this be combated? And I actually want to direct this question first to Jen, because you mentioned a lot about education, and of course you highlighted really well at the young level, but I think you also mentioned there's also education to combat biases in the institutional or senior level. So do you think that, are the underrepresented are excluded from excellence, or the excellence is just diminished because of bias? And if they're either way, what are the ways to combat the bias?
If I'm understanding your question correctly, I'm going to say both. I'm going to say there is a bias within the system, but I think that bias is becoming a little bit more aware. So within the senior leadership, and I noticed the question on bureaucracy, I think the level of transparency, as Dr. Joel spoke to, is really starting to change at least the academy when it comes to underrepresented persons. So I think if I can tie it together, I think the element of bias is real. But I think the element of bias is becoming less prominent in influencing progression through the ranks. However, with that being said, the biases that do exist, I think, might be creating more challenges for women and underrepresented groups when it comes to individual health and well-being, because it is now recognized, it's out there. And it can also be internalized if systems aren't in place to help individuals who are dealing with those biases as they become more transparent. Does that address your question?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, and does anyone else have anything to add? Like Michelle, this first program also talk about combating these biases, because I think a lot of these biases are sort of intrinsic and subconscious. So But of course, there's research suggesting that bringing it to awareness helps to combat it. But yeah, what do you think, Michelle?
Right, thank you. I have to agree with Dr. Jacoby in that it is both. I think a real challenge is lack of access and lack of opportunity. And so, not so much that an individual does not have the qualifications, the individual doesn't have a seat at the table. And so, one of the things about the first program is the opportunity for institutions to try a battery of interventions that we can ask, did this have an impact? Did this make a difference? For example, someone had mentioned the importance of networking. We all know the importance of networking. And so one of the ways to address networking within the first program is the expectation that every incoming faculty member have not only a mentor, but a sponsor. And it's the sponsor who's the real advocate for the faculty member. They're the ones who say, hey, there's this conference coming up. Why don't you come along? Or, hey, this is Dr. So-and-so. She just started at such and such university. So making that a deliberate expectation of participating in the program, we hope that activities such as that will help address both the bias concern and the lack of opportunity concern as well. And so, it's going to take a little bit before we know the impact of the different types of interventions that are posed, but they are moving in that direction to try to quell that gap.
I think for interest of time, probably can only do one. And I think there's a bit of overlap in the questions that haven't yet been answered. And I guess sort of summarized by an anonymous attendee's question, are there initiatives that take a more intersectional and complete approach, brackets, taking into account that sometimes women don't apply because of the imposter phenomenon, etc.? To be honest, I think some research suggests that imposter syndrome might not be just a female thing. And I think I've sort of typed the answer to like sort of fitting in a question before that. I guess ALBA and my personal position is that the system needs to change to combat biases and so on, or rather lift the impression that women can't win to fight the imposter syndrome. But I guess, what do you think about the imposter syndrome? How could you comment that, is it a gender specific thing? And, how can we help people to overcome it? Sorry, I have a temporomandibular joint dysfunction. I keep sucking my teeth because I'm in a bit of a pain. But yeah.
I'm gonna
Any of you ever had an imposter syndrome? Okay, yeah. Continue, sorry, Dr. Jen.
I saw the smiles around the room. I think the answer is unanimous on that. But relative to imposter syndrome, it doesn't just exist within women or other underrepresented groups. It does exist within the more prominent and numerical numbers with respect to Caucasian men, at least in Canada. I think the difference is how imposter syndrome is overcome based upon whether you're a man or a woman or from a minority might be where we start to see some differences that can benefit change with respect to self-identification of imposter syndrome, and then how others around a minority group versus a majority group can support those with imposter syndrome.
Yeah, more research is needed, but yeah, I agree. I think it's very specific to types of background. Did anyone else want to add? Okay, then maybe we can answer Matilda's question. But most of all, how do we address the fact that it has been shown less women apply for grants, positions, and promotions? That is so true. Without the fixing women approach. So Farah, did you want to say something?
Yeah, so about the whole less women applying to grants, positions, promotions, that's very real. It's been documented across many studies. I think one of the ways we've tried to address it at Five Women Science is through Wikipedia editathons. It's this whole idea that there are so many women, there's so many folks belonging to historically underrepresented groups who have so many achievements that do meet the notability criteria for having a Wikipedia page. Yet it's so hard to create a Wikipedia page and acknowledge some of those achievements, partly because it's hard to get all of those achievements documented. So, for example, if women aren't being interviewed in media outlets, if they're not being nominated for prizes, then there isn't sort of that track record that you can cite in a Wikipedia page. And it's partly because of the culture of Wikipedia, which I will not get into for now. But it's but through initiatives like this, the ones that we've discussed today, through creating Wikipedia pages, we can help sort of elevate the folks who are doing so much of this important work to make sure that we're changing the face of science first, but to also provide role models to encourage other folks to, yes, go apply for that grant, positions, or promotions. Of course, awareness isn't enough. I know one of our fellow panelists mentioned that sponsorship and mentorship are important. I think there's a sentence that goes around that says that, women are over-mentored and under-sponsored, and it is very true. We do need folks to also open the door and make sure that people are being empowered with the tools that they need to write that successful grant, to know which awards or opportunities they should apply for. So I think it's a multifaceted issue, and we need sort of everybody on board, from mentor sponsors to more awareness, more promotion, and more being comfortable with putting ourselves forward for opportunities to help address an issue like this.
What do you think of something drastic that Australia's done to just say we guarantee exactly the same number of grants will go to women and men? I really applauded it. I was like, well, no, the changes are so incremental and it's so slow. Let's do something drastic, because what that gave was, because I personally have previously not applied for grants and thought, oh, why are you applying? Your track record is not that great, but thought not to set it to anyone, because, success rate for women for that particular grant would be below 1% and men would be 8%. And I already felt like it was a waste of my time to apply. So I thought just having, showing that sort of guarantee that actually that women will be just as successful or more successful, I think would also be a really good encouragement for people to apply. Anyone else have anything to add? Yeah, I guess we're getting really late. It's past midnight for me now. So thank you so much. I'm gonna just share the screen for the final shot. But I just want everyone to really applaud all the speakers and panelists for really contributing and teaching us a lot and inspiring us also to do more, and also be very hopeful that we are on the right track. Thank you. Desktop.